Welcome to Hard Script.
The first time she said it, it wasn't even private. We were standing near the bar at a launch event. She insisted we attend together, the kind with exposed brick, bad lighting, and people pretending to listen while scanning the room for someone more useful. She was glowing that night. Not because of me. Because 3 men had already told her how sharp her last campaign was, how lucky her clients were, how rare her insight felt. She laughed easily, leaned forward when they spoke, touched her necklace when she wanted to be seen. I waited, like I always did. When I leaned in and asked if we were heading out soon, she didn't look at me. Her eyes stayed on her phone. Her mouth tightened just enough to be deliberate. She said I needed to stop craving her attention. Not angrily, not loudly, calm, surgical, as if correcting a junior associate who didn't know his place. A few people heard. No one reacted. That made it worse. I nodded once. Not because I agreed, but because I knew better than to argue in public. She slipped her phone into her bag and turned back to the room like I'd already been handled. 10 seconds later, she was laughing again, this time at something a man across the room whispered to her. I didn't recognize him. He knew her name. On the drive home, she talked about branding impressions and momentum and how exhausting it was to be needed all the time. I kept my hands steady on the wheel. Logistics had trained me well. You don't react to noise. You watch patterns. That night, she stayed up late in the living room with her laptop and headphones on. Her voice dropped when she spoke. Not hushed. Focused. Engaged. I passed by once to grab water and saw a name flash on her screen. Ethan. Client. Coffee chain owner. Someone she'd mentioned before, always casually, always followed by praise. In bed, her phone buzzed twice. She turned it face down without checking. In the morning, she kissed my cheek like everything was normal and said she had a video call she couldn't miss. I watched her from the hallway as she shut the door, already smiling. I didn't ask who she was becoming. I just stopped stepping into her frame. That was the first adjustment. The smallest one. A week after the event, Ethan's name started showing up in places it did not belong. At first it was harmless enough. Claire mentioned him during dinner, describing how decisive he was, how rare it was to find a business owner who understood brand positioning without being handheld. She spoke about him with a kind of animation she no longer used with me. When I asked if the new campaign was local, she said he was expanding into 3 more states and might need her on-site soon. She said it casually, like weather. I nodded and kept eating. 2 days later, I ran into Mark at the warehouse. Mark handled regional vendor contracts and knew everyone who moved product through the city. Over coffee in the break room, he mentioned that one of the fastest-growing coffee chains in the Midwest had just secured a complicated distribution route. He said the owner was ambitious, traveled constantly, and had a reputation for mixing business with whatever else was available. He said the name without thinking. Ethan Caldwell. I did not react. I asked about delivery timelines instead. That evening, Claire took a call on the balcony. She said it was strategy, but her tone was different. Softer. Slower. I stood in the kitchen and watched her reflection in the dark glass. She was smiling at something I could not hear. When she came back inside, she moved past me without meeting my eyes and said she might have to fly out to Chicago to align on creative direction. I asked when. She said soon. She did not offer details. The next morning, her phone buzzed while she was in the shower. I was not looking for anything. The screen lit up on the nightstand beside me. A preview of a voice message appeared. His name again. A line underneath it. Can't stop thinking about last night's ideas. Ideas. When she came out wrapped in a towel, she reached for the phone before she reached for me. That was when I understood something had already shifted, and I was the only one still standing where we used to be. I did not confront her. I adjusted. Logistics teaches you that if a shipment keeps arriving late, you do not argue with the driver. You review the route. Claire's trip to Chicago was framed as a short alignment meeting. She packed lightly but chose the dress she once said was too much for client dinners. She stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, angling her phone to check how she looked on camera. When I offered to drive her to the airport, she said she would just take a car. It would be easier. While she was gone, the apartment felt staged. Clean, quiet, untouched. I handled my work, ran my routes, signed off on schedules. At night, her social media updated with filtered photos of skyline views and coffee cups branded with Ethan's logo. No tags, no faces, just hints. On the second evening, A mutual contact of hers, Amanda, texted me about an industry panel Claire had attended. She said Claire looked radiant, that she and the owner seemed inseparable between sessions. Amanda added a winking comment about power duos and exciting partnerships. I thanked her and put the phone down. Claire came back glowing in a way I had not seen in months. She spoke about expansion plans, about how Ethan trusted her instincts completely. She said he valued her vision. She said it more than once. Later that night, she fell asleep with her phone in her hand. A notification lit up the room. This time the preview was longer. It was not about ideas. It was about how rare it was to meet someone who truly understood him. It mentioned the hotel bar. It mentioned how he wished the trip were longer. I read only what the screen allowed before it dimmed. In the morning, I transferred half of our savings into a separate account under my name. Not secretly, just quietly. I scheduled a meeting with a leasing agent near my office. I removed our framed photo from my desk at work and replaced it with a blank notepad. When Claire kissed me goodbye and told me to stop being distant, I looked at her and saw someone already halfway out the door. I did not ask for proof. I began preparing for departure. The decision did not arrive with drama. It arrived with a lease agreement. I signed it during lunch, a small apartment 15 minutes from my office. Clean lines. No shared history. The leasing agent congratulated me like I was starting something new. I did not correct her. Claire told me she had another trip coming up, this time to finalize rollout details. She said Ethan's team needed her on-site again because momentum could not be lost. She mentioned how exhausting it was to carry so much responsibility. I watched her move through the apartment, already mentally elsewhere, and realized she no longer noticed what I carried. The night before she left, she accused me of pulling away. She said I had been cold since Chicago. She said relationships required presence, not silence. I listened. When she asked if I was even trying anymore, I told her I was simply giving her space. She shook her head like I had failed a test. The morning she flew out, I helped her load her suitcase into the car she ordered. She hugged me quickly, distracted, her phone buzzing in her hand. I stood there until the car disappeared, then went back inside and began packing. I did not rush. I wrapped dishes carefully. I boxed my clothes, my books, my documents. I left everything that felt like it belonged to the version of us she was building for someone else. By evening, the apartment echoed. I changed my relationship status without commentary. I removed our photos from my accounts. I sent a brief message to our closest friends and to her parents, informing them that Claire and I would be living separately for the foreseeable future. No details, no accusations. Then I turned off the shared credit card. That night my phone lit up with missed calls from her. Then messages. She asked what was happening. She said the card had been declined at dinner. She said this was not funny. I did not block her. I just did not respond. For the first time, the silence belonged to me. By the time Claire landed back home, I was no longer there. She walked into an apartment that looked staged for showing. Her shoes were still by the door. Her desk was intact. The framed wedding photo was gone. My side of the closet was empty. The drawers in the bathroom were cleared with precision, as if a hotel guest had checked out early. She called first. Then she texted. Then she sent a voice message asking what kind of stunt I thought I was pulling. I listened to it while sitting on the floor of my new place, surrounded by unopened boxes. Her tone shifted halfway through. Confusion replaced irritation. She said we needed to talk in person. She said I was overreacting. I did not respond. Instead, I made 2 calls. The first was to a lawyer recommended by a colleague who had gone through a quiet separation the year before. I scheduled a consultation and forwarded him the financial documents he requested. The second was to a contact in Chicago, someone who handled regional freight contracts for high-traffic retail chains. I asked about Ethan Caldwell's expansion. I asked about recent compliance inspections and vendor disputes. The answers were interesting. Apparently, rapid growth had created cracks. A few unresolved tax filings. A pending dispute with a supplier. Nothing catastrophic. Just pressure points. I did not threaten anyone. I did not send anonymous tips. I simply passed along publicly available information to a journalist I knew from college who covered small business irregularities. I framed it as background for a broader piece on overextended coffee franchises. 2 days later, an online article questioned the stability of Ethan's latest expansion. It did not accuse. It asked careful questions. Claire texted me that night. She said Ethan was under stress and needed her support. She said this was the worst possible time for me to disappear. She said I was being selfish. I read the message twice. For the first time since the event, I felt nothing urgent. No need to defend. No need to explain. She had chosen a man who thrived in spotlight and risk. I had simply stepped out of it. The shift did not happen online. It happened in rooms she could not control. Claire was scheduled to speak at a regional marketing mixer a few days after the article circulated. I knew because she had mentioned it weeks earlier, proud that her calendar was filling faster than ever. I did not attend. I did not need to. Mark's sister, Jenna, worked in event coordination and had been assigned to the venue. She texted me afterward, not out of loyalty, but out of curiosity. She said the atmosphere felt different. She said a few attendees had whispered about Ethan's expansion and whether Claire's strategies were tied too closely to unstable brands. She mentioned that during a Q&A, someone asked how she vetted clients before publicly aligning with them. Claire handled it smoothly, according to Jenna. Confident. Composed. But the question lingered in the room. That evening, Claire sent me a long message. She said people were speculating. She said our separation had somehow become part of the gossip, even though she had told almost no one. She asked if I had been talking. She said she felt exposed. I had not said a word beyond the brief notice that we were living apart. The rest traveled on its own. The next day, her mother called me. Not to accuse. To ask what was going on. She said Claire seemed overwhelmed. She said Ethan had pulled back because the press attention was inconvenient. She described it carefully, as if choosing the right words would make it less obvious. Apparently, he needed to focus on stabilizing his brand. Apparently, this was not the right moment for distractions. I thanked her for checking in and told her Claire was talented enough to handle herself. When I hung up, I imagined Claire reaching for her phone and finding fewer messages than before. Fewer late-night voice notes. Fewer assurances that she was exceptional. She wrote to me again that night. This time there was no irritation. She said she felt alone in a way she had not expected. I did not answer. Silence, when used precisely, changes the temperature of a room. 2 weeks after I moved out, Claire showed up at my office. She did not call ahead. She did not warn me. The receptionist buzzed my extension and said a woman claiming to be my wife was asking to see me. I walked through the corridor with the same measured pace I used when resolving shipping disputes. She was standing near the glass conference room, dressed sharply, but there were faint lines under her eyes that had not been there before. She looked smaller in that space, out of context without an audience. A few of my colleagues glanced over, curious but polite. She said we needed to talk somewhere private. She said she did not understand why I was handling this so coldly. She said I was punishing her without explaining the crime. I led her into the conference room and closed the door. The blinds were half drawn, letting in a strip of afternoon light across the table. She told me Ethan had stepped back from their collaboration for now. She described it as strategic distancing due to press complications. She said he needed to protect his marriage and his investors. She insisted it had never been what I thought. She said I had misread professional closeness for something else. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, she asked why I had cut the credit card and moved out without a conversation. She said partners did not disappear like that. She said I owed her clarity. I told her I was no longer interested in competing for attention in my own marriage. I told her I had adjusted my position accordingly. She stared at me as if I were speaking a different language. Before leaving, she asked if there was still something to salvage. She said she missed how steady I used to be. She said the apartment felt unfamiliar without my routines. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I told her stability is not something you notice until it is gone. Then I opened the door and let her walk out alone. After the visit to my office, the messages changed. They were no longer defensive. They were careful. Claire wrote that she had ended things with Ethan completely. She said she saw now how blurred the lines had become. She described late-night strategy calls that turned personal, the hotel bar conversation that crossed into something she could not take back, the business trip where professionalism dissolved into something physical and reckless. She did not offer details. She did not need to. She said she had felt validated. Chosen. She admitted she liked being pursued without having to ask. She said when I asked why she was distant and told her I missed her, she had already been receiving that attention elsewhere. She repeated the phrase she had used at the event, as if hearing it again hurt her now. She said telling me to stop craving her attention had been easier than admitting she was giving it to someone else. I read the message in my apartment, sitting at the small kitchen counter that had never seen us together. She asked if we could meet somewhere neutral. She said she did not want to come to my office again. She said the look on my face in that conference room had unsettled her more than any argument would have. We met at a quiet cafe across town. Not one of Ethan's. She arrived early and was already seated when I walked in. There was no performance this time. No polished confidence. She spoke about sleepless nights, about checking her phone and finding nothing, about realizing that the man who once filled every gap in her day had simply recalculated and moved on to protect himself. She said she had mistaken steadiness for neediness. When she reached across the table, I did not pull away, but I did not close the distance either. She asked if I was already seeing someone else. She asked if I had already replaced her. I told her I had replaced a dynamic, not a person. She looked at me like she was finally hearing the silence for what it was. The fallout did not explode. It tightened. Ethan's expansion stalled quietly after the article gained traction. Investors hesitated. A supplier dispute surfaced publicly. Claire told me later that he had stopped answering personal messages altogether and redirected everything through his assistant. The late-night voice notes disappeared. The private compliments dried up. What had once felt urgent and intoxicating turned procedural and distant. She told me this during our second meeting, this time in a small park near my apartment. There were people walking dogs nearby, couples on benches, life moving forward without commentary. She said she had tried to reach him for clarity, not romance. She said he responded with a short message about needing to protect his family and brand. She described the moment she understood she had been temporary in a life that would continue unchanged without her. As she spoke, her voice carried no anger, just something stripped down. She admitted that after I moved out, the apartment felt louder. She said she would walk past the empty side of the closet and feel something collapse inside her. She said she had not realized how much of her confidence had been anchored to the certainty that I would always be there, steady and available. She asked if I had planned all of this. The separation, the silence, the timing. I told her I had simply stopped showing up where I was not respected. She nodded slowly, as if replaying that sentence against her own actions. Later that week, mutual friends stopped inviting her to events as a pair. They invited her alone. Some invitations did not come at all. No one accused her. No one confronted her. The absence of normalcy did the work. She texted me one night and said she felt like she was standing in a house where all the furniture had been removed. I did not rush to fill the space. For the first time, she was alone with the echo of her choices. She came to my apartment unannounced one evening, not dressed for impact, not prepared for an audience. She stood outside my building until I walked up from the parking lot and saw her leaning against the brick wall like someone waiting for a verdict. She said she did not want to argue anymore. She said she was tired of defending something that had already fallen apart. She admitted she had chased validation because it felt immediate and loud, while what we had built was steady and quiet. She said she confused consistency with desperation and mistook my presence for something she could manage instead of value. Inside, the apartment was simple. A couch, a table, a lamp. No shared frames. No layered history. She looked around as if measuring the distance she had created. She told me Ethan had fully stepped back, that his focus was on repairing his public image and preserving his marriage. She said there was no dramatic ending, just a gradual withdrawal that left her exposed. She said the silence from him felt different than mine. His felt strategic. Mine felt final. She asked if I was done. I did not pace. I did not raise my voice. I told her I had removed myself from a situation where I was competing for basic respect. I told her I had no interest in returning to that version of us. I said if anything moved forward, it would not be built on chasing attention or testing boundaries. She stepped closer and said she understood now. She said she had needed the collapse to see what she had taken for granted. She did not cry. She held eye contact and waited. I let the silence stretch. Then I told her I had not disappeared. I had simply stopped showing up where I was not respected. If she wanted something different, it would start from there, slowly, on terms where attention was mutual and loyalty was not negotiable. For the first time since that night at the bar, she nodded without looking past me. And this time, I did not step back.